Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Design and a Half. I know it's been some while since I actually shot one of these episodes, and I wanted to take this opportunity to create a new episode that is largely focused on some of the issues that I've sort of noticed in the past time that I was off for a little bit. And there's been a lot of discussions in the design community about expectancies from a new job. There's been a lot of discussions about what people want from a new job, and I think some of these expectations are sort of mismatched with the reality of what jobs in design actually feel like and I know work like. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to address some of those issues. There's been a lot of talk going on about what to expect when you're being hired, and I think a lot of lies that are being told, and to some extent some romanticized version of what design is really like in companies is being put out there so that people actually believe it to be true. And I think it does a great disservice both to the people that are jumping in, as well as create some really high expectations as regards to what design feels like in companies in general. And the truth of this is that it's not really as glamorous as you would think. So one of my personal advices that I would give to juniors that are jumping into design is be mindful of the politics that you're going to encounter. And this is something that I largely noticed myself going through a lot of organizations back and forth. And I've noticed this being a pattern. Wherever there's people, there's going to be politics. It's something that's absolutely inescapable. It's something that you probably can't do anything about to change them. And often times you're just going to be a subject of those politics, whether you like it or not. And from my personal experience, what you can do to make your life a little bit easier in that respect is to either integrate yourself into those politics or not necessarily take advantage of them, because that might sound odd, but sort of try to see where you fit into the whole picture. And by that, I mean observe the actors of said politics, see what they want out to get out of the company, out of their position, and so on and so forth. And either not choose a side, be neutral, or if you have to choose a side, be really careful how you you sort of influence the balance of power in said organization. Because and by this I mean the fact that there's always going to be people who have an agenda, have something they want to pursue. For example, someone might want to pursue better position. Do you want to step and sort of help that person reach that position, and in turn maybe gain an ally into the company that might help you when you need a position change as well? Or do you take a stance where you say, well, this person might not deserve their promotion, and I'm just either going to stay neutral or I'm going to sabotage them? Sabotaging someone in that specific case is not something you want to do, because more often than not, people are really vengeful, and it's going to affect you to some extent that's really unpredictable for you at that point of in your career. Besides, I think, and this is especially valid for juniors, you have to be really careful who you choose as a mentor, both from an ethical point of view as well as a professional point of view. Because some mentors have a looser ethic than others, whereas some have sort of a stricter moral code that ensures that you'll be able to go back to your house and feel okay with yourself, not having to sort of feel bad about what you have done. So you have to really be careful about how you see things from a political standpoint in absolutely all companies, because these politics do exist Whether you like it or not, you're going to be influenced by them, and you're going to be subject to those politics as well, to some point in your career. And I think it's really important for you to know that before jumping into a career in design and expecting it to be just focus on the craft and not on the and not have to deal with things like politics, because this is absolutely not true. And this is false, because I've seen a lot of even some of the larger companies out there say they're not focused on politics, but it's largely not true. There's higher and lower degrees of politics. Some are more obvious, some are more subtle, and you will probably have to find them out by yourself while working there, just by interviewing people, or actually befriending people and talking to people and finding out what they really want, either out of the job or out of the position itself or out of the company too. And I think it's just something that few people talk about, few people really want to acknowledge it, and more than this, I think there's a really unrealistic expectation that these politics are not going to happen in your organization, in wherever you're working right now. Chances are they are already happening, and you're probably just oblivious to them. That's all. I think another really cool advice about your work is to not expect it to be stellar all the time, because it's probably not going to be. And to this extent, I think a lot of us designers are really hard on ourselves because we expect whatever we do to be absolutely top notch all the time. And I think long term, this is not beneficial for us because, first of all, it leads you to be always frustrated with the fact that whatever work you're done is not going to be appreciated by your fellow designers. And I think, first of all, you have to ask yourself who you're designing in the first place. Do you design for the problem, for the person, or for other designers as well? Because if you're designing for other designers, I think you're missing the point entirely. Your point is not to design for other people's appreciation, for other people's opinion, for other people's like, love, and I don't know, care, if you will. However, and I say this because I sometimes do this mistake myself, we are subjected to those appreciation biases just because our nature as designers is to interact with people, and people want to belong to a group. Wanting to belong to a group is natural for us, which means that by definition, we will sort of seek the path that makes us belong to a larger group. In this case, either a designer group, or in case of our organizations, the group that we're targeting to reach our next career path. I don't know. It really depends on who you are and what you want out of your career path as well. I think this is quite important for you to know, especially if you're a junior designer, but maybe you should be reminded of this as a senior, to be more lenient with yourself, to not be so harsh on yourself when you're judging your work and look at it and say, well, this is not necessarily portfolio worthy. But then the question comes and says, what is portfolio worthy? What is something that is worthy of being put in a portfolio? Because if you're judging it from that criteria, then basically nothing could potentially be as good enough to be put in a portfolio, unless it's something which is Dribble, Behance, or that sort of quality. And first of all, real design really doesn't make it to that level 90% of the time, because there's a lot of stakeholders involved. Whenever you're doing design, you're doing it with at least 10 or 15 other people, maybe more, depending on the scope of the organization, scope of the product. It depends on a lot of stuff. But it's rarely that sort of level of perfection and detail, which means that in reality, design is never perfect. It's never done. It's sort of an iterative process that you go through each time, and you make it better by 10, 5, insert random percent here. This means that you shouldn't look at your work as something that's basically completed, done. It's just an intermediate state of design. Design is a constant intermediate state of work, if you want to. There is no such thing as a complete design. Design is ongoing work, just like development is. In some respects, I think, as much as we we might not like to say it, design and development have quite a lot in common, because both of them rely on this principle of iteration. And I think being mindful of this fact, and especially trying to groom juniors of the fact that whatever you're doing is never going to be perfect. And first of all, you shouldn't judge yourself as well as other designers based on how perfect their design looks, is something that should be ingrained in you and should be taught, I think, starting from school. But if you ask me, this is where the problem lies, because all of us, when we're in school, we're sort of being brought up to be these perfect individuals that are looking for the highest marks. And being grown up in this sort of mindset where you're looking to score something like the perfect 10, or maybe a 9 or maybe an 8, you have the same mindset whenever you're doing design. It's absolutely difficult to escape it, just because of how we were brought up. And school is such a major part of our lives, and a way of how we're formed as individuals. And it's one of the biggest reasons why I think this influences us both as designers and as well as the way we look at the world by itself. Not necessarily only as designers, because I think to some extent being a perfectionist and sort of trying to score the highest number of points on across the board is valid, regardless of what type of job you have, whether you're talking about as a developer, a project manager, a designer, what have you. It doesn't really matter. This is sort of our mindset that we're brought up with, and that's very, very detrimental to our development going further, as well as our mental state and mental well-being in the long run, because it preconditions us to be sort of focused on being perfect all of the time without focusing us on being happy and being content with what we have. To some extent, it's okay, because if you were content all the time with little or nothing, that would mean that there wouldn't be no progress. And that's fine. But we have to be really, really careful about how we balance these things out, and especially how we as seniors especially, try to teach junior designers, junior developers, juniors, everywhere, about how they should balance their careers so that they don't make the same mistakes we did. Sometimes people listen, sometimes they don't, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. However, our sort of moral duty is to tell them these things, just like parents do, and let them as children make their own mistakes. That's my personal belief about how mentoring should work in a lot of ways. It's not about creating a perfect copy of yourself as a designer, but sort of grooming that individual that's your mentee, and finding whatever's unique about him, and helping him uncover that and cultivate it so that it becomes his own unique value proposition, if you would think of it as a product. As weird and as bad as that sounds, it's really well intended, I assure you. I think being more forgiving with yourself as a junior designer, allowing yourself to make mistakes, and especially learning from those mistakes, is good for you, just because you would be able to grow. And second of all, it would be able to help you grow in a sort of steady pace that's not frustrating you. It's not creating a lot of unslept nights for you. And it would sort of give you a bit of balance in your life, to be able to balance out work with your personal life. Because and I think this is to some extent a mistake we all do, is reach just for the highest position possible career wise, without thinking of what needs to be sacrificed in the long run. And second of all, whether it's worth it to sacrifice those things or not. Because to some extent, in some situations, some people might not feel like those things are worthy of sacrificing, like family, relationships, and so on. Relationships are really important, and I think a lot of people really underestimate them and how they help us develop as individuals and sort of be sane. Because to some extent, I've noticed that people are really, really competitive, regardless if you're talking about jobs, if you're talking about any aspect of their lives, really. Because I'm just comparing jobs with games right now in gaming. And to some extent, some while back, gaming used to be this really comfortable and cool thing that you would do to relax yourself, not put yourself into a sort of continuous state of stress. However, right now I've noticed that even gaming has become more like a job than anything else. Like the concept of developing games has become its own job, which is fine because it has to produce money, obviously. However, consuming games has become an addiction because people see it as a job. Like, I really want to be better than that person. Then what? I really want to stream. Then what? Because I want to make more money. Then what? I want to get a bigger house. Then what? I have a bigger car, and so on and so forth. And at some point, they stop asking the question, why? A lot of people ask the question, why? Because they have critical thinking. They have this way of self-analysis and thinking, okay, why am I doing this? Is there a specific reason why I'm doing this? And asking that question, why, sort of gives you a pause and a break to think about your motivation and why exactly it is that you're doing that specific thing. But in a lot of situations, I've noticed that people just sort of copy themselves, and it becomes super socially acceptable for us to copy the next person just because this is like the social expectation, the norm, if you want to. And the norm has just become for us to look at others and say, I want his life, I want his car, I want his house, for example, and I don't want to put in the work, or I don't want to put in as much work. I want to be famous. Why do you want to be famous? Because I want everybody to love me. Why do you want everybody to love you? Why do you think that means that you are valid as a person? It doesn't mean that you're valid as a person. You are valid even without them loving you, even without having a super large house. That doesn't necessarily measure success. It's just something that you are programmed to think. If you think about what's happening around you and of the stimuli that are out there in social media. And to some extent, I think this is also happening with the design industry as well, because lately, at least, it's rarely been about the design and more about the success of the designer. Everybody just wants to be either Johnny Ive or, I don't know, insert random name designer here. And they want this because they want to be famous. They want people to love them. They want people to respect them. Let me tell you something. People respect you because you're a decent person. You can be an absolute asshole and people would not respect you, even if you would be the topmost designer working at Apple, Google, or whatever. That doesn't mean people respect you. People respect you for what you put out there, for what you give back to the community that you're part of. They don't respect you for reaching a specific position. They will probably talk behind your back and you will never know about it. This is actually happening right now in a lot of design communities. And this happens because people have become out of touch with themselves to some extent, which is the next, I don't know, tip I could give you is try to be in touch with yourself, try to be to some extent humble, and always be willing to learn, and sort of find something to learn in absolutely everything someone tells you. Like if you're having a discussion with someone, there's always a point to be had and to be learned in that discussion. As a designer, I think you always need to keep learning. And another fallacy is that when you're sort of finished with these boot camps, you can just go and get the job, and that's going to be the end of it all, and you're just going to be progressing to your career and so on and so forth. That's basically a lie. It's not true. That's just the tip. A boot camp that you're participating in gives you sort of the very tip of the iceberg that you need to climb in order to become a professional. The really difficult challenges are ahead of you, not behind you. That's the thing. The really challenging parts are being in projects which are difficult, with a lot of stakeholders, with a lot of people that have different opinions, and being able to manage those people and manage those expectations, manage those products in a way, your own workload, to be honest. Because this is another skill a lot of designers completely lack, in my opinion, or most designers completely lack. It's their ability to handle and manage their own work in accordance to a preset roadmap. There's an expectation that people just leave you in a dark room and you just do your design work and then come out with something, ta-da, this is the perfect thing I designed. That's not really how it goes on, because nobody can afford you to be working in a vacuum without having without having contact with the rest of the team, without having contact with other stakeholders to get input from and sort of develop your idea from a void into something which is actually usable because it has input from several sources. And that's the actual way design happens in a real world. Whether we're talking about autos, whether we're talking about whatever, it doesn't really matter. The point is design has multiple points of input, and more often than not, even multiple points of output to some extent. This is something I'll probably touch on at some point later, just because it's a worthy topic to be had in itself, and it's quite complex, to be honest. That said, I hope you found this episode useful. If you did, please click a thumbs up, like it, share it, tell other designers about Design and a Half podcast, and maybe we'll grow some more. Thanks a lot for your time, guys, and thanks for listening in, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.